पृथिवी शान्तिरन्तरिक्षगं शान्तिर् द्यौः शान्तिर्दिशः शान्तिरवान्तर दिशाः शान्तिरग्निः शान्तिर्वायुः शान्तिरादित्यः शान्तिः चन्द्रमा शान्तिर् नक्षत्राणि शान्तिरापः शान्तिरोषधयः शान्तिर्वनस्पतयः शान्तिर्गौः शान्तिरजा शान्तिरश्वः शान्तिः पुरुषः शान्तिर्ब्रह्म शान्तिर्ब्राह्मणः शान्तिः शान्तिरेव शान्तिः शान्तिर्मे अस्तु शान्तिः. May there be peace on earth and in the sky. May there be peace in the water and in all directions. May there be peace in the plants, in the trees and in animals. May there be peace in the hearts of all beings. May there be peace in everyone and in everything. Sarvetra sukhinas santu, sarve santu niramayaha, sarve bhadrani pashyantu, ma kaschit dukkha bhag bhavet, sarvastaratu durgani, sarvo bhadrani pashyatu, sarvas sadbuddhimapnotu, sarvas sarvatra nandatu. May all be happy and healthy. May all see what is good, and may no one experience misery. May all overcome their obstacles and acquire good tendencies. May people everywhere find joy and fulfillment. Let us now spend some time touching the center of peace and joy in our hearts. A good way to begin the practice is to withdraw the scattered energies of the mind and bring them to rest on one point. That point can be our own breathing. Let us therefore practice breathing with awareness. As we breathe in, let us visualize that our body and mind are being filled with love, strength, and compassion. And as we breathe out, let us release all the stress, anxiety, and exhaustion in the body and mind. Let us practice this way for a while. Let us now turn our attention to the region of our heart. Although God is present everywhere and in everyone, the divine presence can be felt most clearly in our hearts. We can meditate in any way we have been taught. To remain focused, we can take the help of a short mental prayer or a mantra or a divine name. Let us now spend some time dwelling on the presence of God in our hearts. Om Asatoma Satkamaya Tamasoma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amritam Gamaya Aviravirmayeti Rudrayatte Dakshinam Mukham Te Namam Pahi Nityam. May the Divine lead us from the unreal to the real, from darkness to light, from death to immortality. May the Divine Consciousness fill our hearts and protect us. Peace, peace, peace. In our last class, we saw that Krishna describes that this world that we experience and our own existence that we experience can be divided into two prakritis or two natures. The lower nature is what he said is the material universe. And a higher nature is the consciousness that is reflected in this material universe. And Krishna, or the Lord, or the divine being is that source of all of this. He's that original consciousness which is reflected in the material universe. And then in verse number 7, he said, let me read the translation. Higher than myself there is nothing else, O Dhananjaya. In me all this is strung like gems in a string. So, the highest existence, the source of everything is God. And higher than God there is nothing. Although I'm using the term God, and as I have often pointed out, it's problematic because the word God already has pre-existing, just like pre-existing conditions for health issues. Whenever we use any terms, there is already some pre-existing notions connected with it. And so that's why, but God is the most common term that is used. But recognize that when I say God in the context of the Gita or the Vedanta, it's not the God sitting somewhere above or from whom who has created this world out of nothing. That's not the God that I'm speaking about. The God that I speak about is the source, the ground of all existence. Is the Sat of the Satchidananda, the one who is the source of everything. So that's the kind of God. And so that God, who is consciousness itself, from whom this material universe and that consciousness is reflected in the material universe. That's how it has all come. And that is why he says, in me, that is in consciousness, this entire, each and every object, living and non-living, is embedded in that consciousness. So just like in a garland, while the flowers are different, but all of those flowers are connected with the string that is strung through each flower. As individuals, as objects, we are different. But there is something that is connecting us all. And what connects us all is this consciousness. Now, how is this consciousness present? In what form or in what way can we think about the presence of God? You see, we as human beings, we have minds, and that's all that we can do. We're dealing with religion or spirituality. we have to use our mind, because it isn't like we have a lot of choice. There is the body, there is the mind, that's the intellect. You just have to use what you have got. Now, the mind needs something more tangible to hold in order to do its function. So while it's great to say God is present like the string in a garland, well, that's an analogy, it kind of gives us some idea. But then we say, well, how is God present in this object? How is God present in the table? How is God present in the person? We need something more concrete to hold on to. So in the next few verses, Krishna will give some examples. This, obviously, among the trillions and God knows gazillions objects and entities in this world, if Krishna was going to give example of all the Gita, we would never finish the Gita. So he's just giving a few samples of how that divine is present in every being. So let's now read verse number 8. Rasohamapsu kaunteya prabhasmi shashi suryayoho pranavas sarvavedeshu shabdakhe paurusham drishu. I am, O son of Kunti, sapidity in water, lustre in the moon and the sun, the syllable Om in all the Vedas, sound in ether, and enterprise in man. Again, a few examples of how we can think of the presence of God in the various entities we meet. So he says in water, sapidity means the taste. Now, I must say something about water here. This is not this water. Just to make sure this is what I'm going to try to. Actually, the primal element. So, as we have seen on earlier occasions, when we speak about the material universe, we have a right to ask, what are the building blocks of this universe? How did it come about? And of course, from a material worldview, we might go to Big Bang, or we might have several other competing or associated theories about how did all this come about. Now, the Gita has a theory of its own, which actually goes way beyond even where the material science begins. And it begins with space. How did and this is something interesting, that is space, how would you think of space? Is simply space absence of everything, or space is something? What do you think? It's something, right? So the space then would be a material entity. When we say a vacuum, does vacuum mean absence of everything or presence? It's okay. Let me put it this way. Let's go this way. When we speak about ignorance, is ignorance something, or is ignorance simply absence of knowledge?
It's absence of knowledge.
That means ignorance doesn't have an existence of its own. It's merely an absence of something.
No, it's something that exists based on the absence of knowledge. Like you have to have the absence of knowledge as a prerequisite to have this thing called ignorance that's perhaps created.
So does ignorance exist?
Yes.
In that case, yes.
Well, if it is simply absence of something, how can it be an existence of something else? It's like, for instance, now, I am present here, right? Now, I leave this room. So this room has my absence. So I'm not here. There isn't anybody, right? So normally when we say absence of something, I'm not trying to prove one way or the other. I'm just trying to see how we normally, when we speak about, say, ignorance, we think about it as absence of knowledge. But it's also possible to see ignorance as something. Why do we? I don't want to go too much into it. This might take us a little bit further off what we are discussing now. But still, it is good to kind of quickly just look at it. The example that is given in Vedanta is classical example is of course the rope and the snake. A coiled rope in a semi-lit room is mistaken for a snake. What is necessary in order for me to see the snake? Clearly, if the rope is present and I know it's a rope, then I'm never going to see the snake there. So my ignorance of the rope is necessary in order for me to mistake it for something else. So it is my ignorance of the rope that produces the snake. So the ignorance of the rope is the cause and the perception of the snake is the result. Now, if the perception of the snake is something positive, and it has to be positive because I'm not simply seeing there the absence of the rope, I'm seeing there the presence of the snake. So, if I'm seeing the presence of something, no presence can come out of an absence. That's how the Vedantic thinkers thought about. That is actually, we saw this in the second chapter of the Gita. Maybe would you recollect which verse in the I'm even giving you a clue. It's in the second chapter of the Gita. Will support the statement that I'm making now. That a presence cannot come out of absence. I'm actually almost translating the same verse, but in a different word. Okay, take a look at it when you go home. The verse is this: "Nasato vidyate bhavo, na bhavo vidyate sataha," which simply means na asataha bhavo, nasato vidyate bhavo, bhavaha vidyate. Asataha means non-existence. Bhavaha means existence. So what the Gita says in the second chapter, what Krishna himself is saying, existence cannot come out of non-existence. And non-existence cannot come out of existence. So if I'm perceiving something as existing, that perception of existence can only result from something which is existing. So an absence of something cannot lead to the presence of something else. And that's how Vedanta sees the category of ignorance not as something, not as purely absence, because if it were absent, then nothing would happen. On the other hand, it's not even seen as present, because if it were present, it can never be absent. Okay, there's one more. I need to take a step back. How do we define existence? Is there such a thing as a temporary existence? What do you think?
Yes.
Well, if something is existing temporarily, would you really say it's real? For instance, our dreams. You cannot say their dreams don't exist. If they don't exist, what are you seeing? You're seeing something at night, right? So you have to admit that there's something we see. So, but if what we see is real, why do we dismiss it after we wake up in the morning and say that, oh, that's not real? Why are we able to dismiss the dreams as unreal? Because even though we see that they are there, they don't last. They're just kind of a temporary reality. They are a semblance of reality for a limited period of time as long as I'm asleep. And that's why we say, oh, it's not really real, as opposed to this world, which seems to have a persistence of its own. And therefore, if something is only temporarily real, we dismiss it as a dream or a magic or an illusion. It's like the rope you see in the snake. As long as you don't know it's a rope, for you the snake is very real. Then you switch on the light, you know it's a rope, and then the snake disappears. Then you don't worry and think, oh my God, where did that snake disappear? I still need to search now for it. You don't have to search for it because, there was really no snake there. I was only imagining it. So, that which is satya, that which is real, is nitya, is eternal. This really you need to kind of stamp it firmly in your heart, because that's the basic premise in Vedanta. When we say God is real, means God is eternal. In contrast then, when it is said, what is the status of this body? What is the status of this world? What is the status of every material entity? It's constantly changing. A few particles of matter come together, you call it a production of a new object, or you call it, in terms of living being, birth. And then these particles which held together and in a certain form, in a certain combination, then get separated, become a heap of dust or ashes, and then we call it death. So it seemed to have existence in the middle, before the birth, after the birth and before death. This entity called the body seems to have existence, but it's not eternal. So it's in that sense, this material universe is said to be apparent or unreal. It's unreal not because it can't be seen, not because it can't be experienced. It's unreal because it is not lasting. Of course, the world that we see is more lasting than a dream. But it's only a difference of degree. A dream, if it's for a few hours, the world may seem to go for a few more years, that's all. But it's not eternal. This is the main thing. The only thing that is eternal, the only thing that never changes, the only thing that never is absent is awareness, is consciousness, chaitanya, chit. Other than that, everything goes, everything disappears. And therefore, ignorance is an entity which you cannot say is unreal, because we all experience ignorance. There are lots of things we can say, I don't know what it is all about. We cannot say it is real, because if it were real, it would never disappear. So it's neither real nor unreal. Like the snake. The snake is not unreal because you are seeing it. It's not real because it disappears when you switch on the light. So that state in which you cannot definitively say something is real or unreal, which seems to be real for a time, the word that is used in Sanskrit for that is called mithya. And mithya simply means apparently real. So there are two things. Apparently real means really unreal. But you can say there are two kinds of unreal things. There are some kinds of unreal things which you have never seen and no one has seen. In the classical texts, the example they used to give in olden days was Shashashringa. Shashashringa means a rabbit with a horn. Olden days, they could say no one has seen it and no one will ever see it. Today, we might hesitate with all the the DNA and intermixing of different species. Probably not impossible to grow horns on a rabbit. So probably that example now has to be retired. So is there any example now which we can say, is there anything in life which we can definitively say never existed, it's not existing now, and can never exist in the future? I'm going to hazard a guess, and I hope it's right. How about a square circle? I mean, unless you change the definition of these terms, there is no way you're going to ever see a square circle, or anyone can claim they have seen a circle which is a square. So now, a square circle is an unreal entity. No one has experienced it, no one will ever experience it. A rope which is mistaken for a snake, that snake is also an unreal entity. The difference is this: a square circle no one has ever seen and no one will ever see. But a snake in a rope, it's possible. We make a mistake. Or if you are traveling in a desert, seeing an oasis, seeing a water, and then you go close and you find there is no water. Those kind of mistakes we do. So, well, that's also really the water that you see in a desert due to an optical illusion, that's unreal, and yet you see it. So just keep this at the back of your mind. The meaning of real, the two kinds of unreal things. One kind of unreal which is never experienced, the other kind of unreal which is experienced for a while, for a time. And therefore, the reason all this came about was about ignorance. So what Vedanta points out is that at some point, knowledge got covered with ignorance. When it happened, how it happened, no one can say. Just like your own sleep. Try, and if you have never tried it before, try tonight when you go home. Try falling asleep consciously. Can you see yourself entering into sleep? And you see that you will not be able to do it. Because that's what sleep by definition is. So you are, when you switch off the light, when you lie in your bed, you're conscious, you know who you are, you know where you are, and you keep on observing what's happening. And at some point, it's all going to go. And at that point, no one knows exactly at which moment you enter into the sleep state. But what exactly is happening at that time? In that state, in that moment, ignorance is enveloping you. Ignorance of what? Well, ignorance of who you are. Until you fall asleep, if I were to ask you who you are and where you are, you'll say, well, I'm so and so, I'm lying in my bed. Once you're asleep, your identity is hidden. That time you don't have consciousness who you are. That's why it is said, a king who dreams that he is a beggar and a beggar who dreams that he is a king, there isn't really much difference, isn't it? And you could be the emperor of the universe, and in your dream, if in your dream you are still a homeless beggar, your being a king doesn't help you. You have to, as long as you're dreaming, you have all the pain and suffering and the problems of a beggar. And same thing with regard to a beggar, a homeless person, a penniless person who is dreaming, I'm the emperor of the universe. As long as that person is dreaming of being an emperor, all the problems that existed don't exist. Or maybe different kinds of problems come as an emperor. So that's what sleep is. So asleep is ignorance. I become ignorant of my waking identity. I become ignorant about everything associated with my waking identity. And what happens? Dreams start. in order for dreams to occur in my life, I have to sleep. And sleep means I have to forget who I am. So now, I forget who I am, and I become the creator of a world I call the dream world. And then, of course, I sustain, I maintain, I nourish that dream world by continuing to sleep for a few hours. And then in the morning, when I wake up, I kind of destroy my dream world. It's almost like you go to a beach, you build a sand castle, you play with it, and then when it's time to go home, you just kind of destroy it yourself. That's pretty much what we do. So, in a way, every one of us is a little God. We are creating a world every night, maintaining it and destroying it. And what made that dream world possible was this ignorance. And what does waking up mean? Waking up means, again, I know who I am. Again, I know where I am. So it was ignorance that led to the creation of the world, and the recovery of my knowledge, who I am, destroyed that world, and I again know who I am. Now, in all this process, the only entity that was real was me, who was asleep. Each and every person and object I saw in my dream was my own creation. Nothing existed apart from me. I forgot myself, I created the world, I remembered who I am, the world got destroyed, and I am there. That's all that has happened. Now, just substitute, if this example is clear, just substitute yourself by Brahman. So Brahman is all that existed, and Brahman fell asleep. What does it mean when a Brahman falls asleep? Well, Brahman was infinite, immortal, pure, free, perfect, fell asleep. Brahman forgot that I am infinite, I am pure, I am free, I am immortal. And that ignorance, in that ignorance, then Brahman began to see itself as I am mortal, I am little, I am not free, I am bound. And this entire universe is Brahman's dream. So it's from Brahman that this whole universe has come. And so when will this universe end? When Brahman wakes up. And Brahman waking up really means Brahman again knowing, I am Brahman, Aham Brahmasmi. Then this universe ends. Until that time, it's going to continue. But if we want a process, because I mean, we really don't think about it this way. And I think we mentioned it briefly last time when we spoke. When my dream starts, when I create the dream world, does my dream world begin with a big bang? It doesn't really. It just, all of those things come at once, right? Even though everything comes at once, I don't think that it has come at once. When I meet my grandpa in my dream, the reality is that I and my grandpa were created at the same time in the dream. But still, I feel my grandpa is older than me. I feel my grandpa has lived many more years. My dream itself may be just 2 minutes old, but my grandpa will have lived for several more years before me. And so it's possible to have a mechanism to understand, well, how did all this come about? And then I can say evolution, I can speak about Big Bang and so on. So in a similar fashion, then Vedanta provides a mechanism of how from ignorance everything came about. And those are the primal elements. So first was ignorance. There is an Upanishad called the Taittiriya Upanishad. It goes like this. एतस्माद् आत्मनः आकाशः सम्भूतः आकाशात् वायुः वायोरग्निः अग्नेरापः अद्भ्यः पृथिवी. So from this Atman, the spirit, the consciousness, this Atman goes to sleep. In other words, Atman forgets that I am the Atman. That ignorance of itself, Akasha Sambhutaha, the first space came. From that space came air, from air came fire or light, from that came water, from that came earth. Now this water, earth, fire, these terms are used. Again, that's why I said it's not this water, it's not this. So these are still very superfine elements, extremely subtle, not perceivable by the eyes, not perceivable by our senses. And then later on, they have a mechanism to show how these very subtle particles, the 5 basic primal elements, combine with each other. And from this subtle water element came the gross water, from the subtle and so on. So how the universe comes from the one to the many. In the beginning, it's very subtle, sukshma. Then it slowly becomes gross, becomes visible, perceivable. And all of this long introduction is to show that the examples that Krishna gives here, he is that subtle elements, the subtle thing present in the different objects. And that is what is meant by, O son of Kunti, I am the sapidity in water. So water is considered the taste in everything comes through water. So it's every entity has this subtle water element in it. And what makes one thing taste different from another is this water is the one which gives taste. Okay, if you want me to, maybe next time, if I remember or if you remember, we could have a board or something. Those of you who attended Panchadashi classes that we had a few years ago, I had dealt with it when we studied the first chapter. But just to give you an idea, so there are these 5 basic elements, and we have 5 senses. Each sense is associated with these 5 elements. And so space is associated with sound. And so our sense of hearing, it's the basic ingredient in our sense of hearing is space or akasha. And because of that, the ears become the organ of hearing, organ of capturing sound, because its own basic ingredient is akasha, whose quality is sound. The same is true with vayu or air, our sense of touch, the skin. The sense of touch is again composed of the same element, vayu. And that's why it's able to grasp all sense of touch. Same thing with fire, sight. Our capacity to see comes from the basic element fire or agni. And that is why it's through eyes that we are able to perceive, grasp the colors and the forms. Then water, the basic element of our tongue is water, the sense of taste. And that's how then taste is associated with water. And finally, the smell is associated with earth, with a gross material particle. You can see sometimes, some of the examples sometimes given in books is the first rain. When there's a first rain and you go out, you get a different kind of an aroma coming from the soil. So those are some of the examples given to show how these different senses got associated with the 5 different elements. So now this might make a little bit more sense. Why the divine is the sapidity in water, the power to taste, the sense of taste. Lustre in the moon and the sun, that effulgence. the syllable Om in all the Vedas, and sound in ether. In many of the old books, they should translate Akasha or space as ether. So here ether is just space or Akasha. And enterprise means the vigor in human beings. So these are the subtle things within us in which we can think about the presence of God within us. Let's read verse number 9. Punyo gandhav prithivyam cha tejaschasmi vibhavasau Jivanam sarvabhuteshu tapaschasmi tapasvishu. I am pure odor in earth. Remember I told you earth is associated with smell. Brightness in fire, life in all beings, and austerity in the ascetics. You can see again all the finer, the subtler essence of the different objects. It is there that we can meditate on or think about the presence of God in that way in different objects. Verse number 10. Bijam mam sarvabhutanam vidhi partha sanatanam buddhir buddhimatam asmi tejas tejasvinamaham. Know me, O Partha, to be the eternal seed of all beings. I am the intelligence of the intelligent and the prowess of the powerful. Prowess is the heroism. So you can see again, eternal seed of all beings, meaning the potency present in every entity to perpetuate itself, the cause, the power to produce effect, that is presence of God, that is associated with God. Again, intelligence of the intelligent, the prowess of the powerful. Verse 11. Balavatam chaham kamaraga vivarjitam dharma viruddho bhuteshu kamosmi bharatarshabha. I am the strength of the strong, free from passion and attachment, and O best of the Bharatas, I am that passion in people which is unopposed to one's duty. So I am the strength in the strong. Now the strength can be filled with both passion and attachment. But now here Krishna specifies what kind of strength can be associated with the divine. And he says that strength which is free from passion or desire. Now passion here really means the desire to want something which we don't have. And attachment is that you already have it, you want more of it. So that's how passion and attachment are distinguished here. So strength within us is the strength of God, but that strength in its pure form is free from passion and attachment. Now, there is passion, there is attachment in all of us. Now that is the other entities kind of getting mixed up with that divine element in our heart. Similarly, I am the passion in people which is unopposed to one's duty. So desire, even the presence of desire within us is God. But that desire which helps me carry out my duties well, which helps me do the right thing, which helps me not stray away from my own path. Now that kind of desire is also the presence of God. So these are a few of the things that Krishna mentions in these 3 or 4 verses, giving a sample about how that same divine is present in every entity, connects every entity the way a string connects every flower in the garland. So we will stop here today. Do you have any thoughts, ideas, questions about what we have said? Yeah. Just a minute.
So, Swamiji, you said that the presence of desire which helps me not stray away is the divine. Am I understanding that correctly? Is that correct?
Say that again.
The presence of desire which helps me not stray away.
Stay away from what I need to do or what I need to say. Yeah.
So,
Stay away from duty, so to speak.
okay, so thinking about the dream and awakening, since it's Brahman that's also dreaming, can you elucidate on how ignorance and darkness and evil may also be Brahman?
There is nothing apart from Brahman, sure, of course.
So Brahman contains both.
Brahman can be?
It contains both light and dark and good and evil.
Yes. The way, yes, I mean, actually, that's what will come in the next verse. Actually, it's the other way. They are in Brahman, Brahman is not in them. That's what he will say in verse number 12. It's a little bit like the light, say light of the sun. Now, the light of the sun will fall on that which is good and that which is bad alike. Right? For instance, in that light of the sun, something good can be done. In that same light of the sun, something terrible can be done. Now, the sun itself is untouched by the good and the bad things that are being done. But those good and the bad things become possible because of that light. So that's how everything becomes possible because of Brahman. But Brahman itself is not responsible, neither responsible by it nor touched by it. So in other words, let me put it this way. Let's go back to the dream. So what sustains the dream? What makes the dream possible? Well, in order to, one thing that is necessary, absolutely necessary for the dream is a dreamer. So as long as I'm asleep, my presence is necessary for the dream to continue. I'm asleep, but still, I am still there. So if, as long, okay, let me just put it the other way around. Terrible things happen in my dream, right? Sometimes we have nightmares. Some horrible things happen in the dream. How much is the person who is dreaming terrible dreams responsible for those dreams? We don't have much control over what we dream. So we say, well, if there's a big earthquake and hundreds of people die, and then oftentimes we ask, like, why did God allow it to happen? But that question wouldn't come in Vedanta because God is not producing that earthquake. God is not killing anybody. The things are just happening. But God is necessary even for the earthquake to occur, just like a person who is asleep is necessary for everything in that dream to happen, no matter good or bad. So it's in that sense that Brahman or God is responsible for everything, in the sense that without them it won't occur. Does that make sense? Okay.
Swamiji, so you say that when that the universe ends when Brahman wakes, but there are enlightened beings for whom Brahman has awakened. So how come our universe still exists? Is it?
Yes, your question is based on the idea that that every one of us is a real being. While the example that I gave you, the only real being is Brahman. The only, even in our own example, now for time being, keep Brahman aside. Say you are alone at home. You are the only real being at home. So let's say you are home is the little universe, and you are the only being right now there. Then you go to sleep, and in your dream, you have trees and mountains and earthquakes and fire and millions of people and animals and everything. And then you wake up in the morning. What happened to all those people? Will those people keep on asking, oh, that he has woken up, but we are still here? Would they say that? I mean, so we go back, I think, what we had referred to in an earlier class, that if you hold on, if you're consistent with this imagery, then that question won't arise. Because each of those enlightened beings, as far as they are concerned, their world, they are Brahman, that's it. Now, your problem is that you have seen in your perception of this universe, you are seeing people who are enlightened, who are not enlightened. And you see that some of them are enlightened. Think about it this way. Let's say. Actually, we can go back to your own dream. Let's say in your dream, you meet people, and in your dream also, because you're a Vedanta student, your dream sometimes can be a Vedantic dream. And in your dream, you see that someone has got enlightened in your dream. Not you, but someone else. And then they have gone, and there are other ignorant people. But you see, you might meet enlightened people and ignorant people in your dream, but none of them has an existence independent of you. Their existence depends solely on your remaining asleep. When you wake up, both the ignorant people you met in your dream and the enlightened people you meet in your dream, they're not there. So your question is valid only as long as you're asleep. Okay, yeah. Yeah.
Swami, what's the Sanskrit word for ignorance?
What is it?
The Sanskrit word for ignorance?
Well, there are several words. One word is clearly ajnana. Jnana is knowledge. With the prefix a added before it, ajnana is ignorance. Sometimes they use the word avidya. Again, vidya means knowledge. Avidya also means ignorance. And then one word that gets often used, Krishna himself will use it in a couple of verses later, is Maya. And we will have something more to say about Maya when we come there. Yeah.
Swamiji, when we dream, we have existing knowledge about, and that's all we see. You know, we see grandparents or tree because we are seeing in so-called waking dream time. So my question is, if they both are dream, they don't exist, because Vedanta said that we are above all that. So when we say about rope and snake, because we have pre-exist for snake or rope, so that's how we see rope as a snake, not as a rope. So is there is no rope and snake? That means if this two dream world doesn't exist in Vedanta, so is there no rope or snake? Or this is our mind, we are seeing rope and snake? Because if you say that both the dreams are nothing, because we are creating this world, this is a dream, and we are creating a dream world. Mm-hmm. So the rope and snake, we are seeing snake, a rope as a snake, because we know, we have some kind of idea about snake, that's why we are seeing. So that means there is no rope and snake. That also we are in our mind.
Well, in that rope and snake analogy, the rope is the real entity. The snake is the unreal entity. In that example. Now, that analogy only works up to a point, because still both are actually objects of our perception, both rope and snake. Now we need to bring that example and apply it to us. So if you want to kind of put that example on you, you are the rope. And you have begun to see yourself as the snake. So what is the real entity? I am the infinite being. So suppose the rope was Brahman, and the rope should have said, I am the infinite being. I am pure and perfect. But in that place, instead of seeing the rope, we see snake. Instead of seeing an infinite being, we are seeing a mortal, finite human being. So really we need to put it on us. So that's the difficulty. Yeah.
So my question is related to pain and suffering that exists in the world that we see around us. And I worry that the interpretation that the world is as unreal as the dream that we see, does that deter an individual from like helping people? Because I mean, the pain and suffering of the people is unreal. So does that mean I shouldn't be helping people? Or
Well, no,
alleviating pain?
people who misunderstand the teaching will probably think that way. If they are consistent, they should be able to say that, it's easy to dismiss other people's suffering and pain as unreal. Their own pain and suffering, if they can truly, honestly dismiss their own pain and suffering as unreal, then they are enlightened. But what most people do is that if something happens to them, that's real. They'll do everything to find relief from it. And then they say, well, somebody else, then you kind of invoke this philosophy and say, oh, that's all unreal. Well, that's just cheating in some ways. That's just being my unwillingness to help. I'm misusing some philosophical observation for my own agenda. So that's not how a true student would act. And also we see that those who have lived according to these teachings are more compassionate. They do a lot more to alleviate the sufferings of others than those who don't follow this philosophy. So while it's a good point to debate that, if we think this way, then we may ignore it. In practice, if someone takes this to heart and lives according to this principle, then one will not be able to ignore other people's suffering, just as they won't be able to ignore their own suffering. That's the idea.
The question I have is, so we talked about Brahman being in a dream, but to us, maybe as you said, other people may or may not exist, but to me, my suffering feels so intensely real. And why is that?
But you are Brahman and you are asleep.
Doesn't feel that way. Because this experience is so tangible, so real, and
Look,
the thing is,
in your dream, if someone were to come and tell you this is only a dream, you're not going to believe that person, I can tell you.
True. But there is no experience of Brahman that is there between sleep and waking, there is no, at least if there was an episode of being Brahman, that you could remember, that would have been nice, but there is no memory.
There is no question of remembering. Right now, in your waking state, you are aware of the waking state, right? In your dream state, you are aware of your dreams.
Correct.
Otherwise, you wouldn't be able to see them.
Correct.
In your deep sleep state, you are aware of what's happening, because that's why you wake up in the morning and say, I slept so well, I didn't know anything.
Yes.
So what remains constant through waking, dream, and deep sleep is your awareness.
Correct.
And that is Brahman.
But that doesn't feel infinite or joyful or any of that. It just feels like a bulb or a light.
No, it does feel it doesn't. You see, if it feels infinite, it's already become finite. It doesn't feel finite. You can speak it in negative terms. even in deep sleep state, you don't feel to be finite physically. Deep
Yes.
sleep state,
Yes.
if physical limitations have gone.
Correct.
So that answers your question. The only limitation you have in the deep sleep state, which you're not aware of, is that you're still ignorant. But you pretty much are free from most of the limitations. Yeah.
When Brahman awakes, what happens to time?
Time is as much a part of creation as everything. Time is as much an element of your dream as everything. Time doesn't have an independent existence. I mean, think about it this way. What to speak about the different time zones that we have. But even from that, even apart from that, the time scale, even in the waking state, the time scale varies. I'm not talking about the clock time. Clock time, it's a mechanical thing, it'll go. But sometimes, if the class is interesting, then an hour may pass by and you may feel like, oh, just 10 minutes are over. If the class is boring, even 10 minutes will appear like an hour. So time sometimes hangs heavy. Sometimes it seems to run. Then 5 or 6 or 7 hours of sleep, you might be dreaming, suppose your dream lasts, for 3 hours. 3 hours of your waking time dream, but in the dream world, it's not just 3 hours. Maybe it's 300 years. Maybe you have had several births and reincarnations within those 3 hours in the dream. But the dream doesn't look like it's going in a fast-forward mode. It just seems like a normal way the time moves. If you have a clock in your dream, that clock will show several days have passed. But according to the waking world clock by the side of your bed, it might show only a few hours. So time is not as fixed an entity as we think it is. It's very flexible. Yeah. Sean?
Is Brahman awakening a universal event, such as does it happen to everyone, or is it just confined to me? And then like the next part is, according to Vedanta, does Brahman ever awake for everyone in one occurrence?
When you wake up, do you wake up yourself or you wake up everyone in your dream wakes up? I mean, there is no everyone. Brahman is all that exists.
But perhaps, say I...
Now, when you go to sleep, you created a world. When you wake up, what happens to all the other people? Do they wake up or do they disappear? What happens to them? Where do they go? What? What do you think? Where do your people you meet in your dream go when you wake up?
They essentially just disappear.
Huh?
They essentially disappear.
Did they exist in the first place?
No, they didn't.
So then even the everyone that you're talking of don't exist apart from Brahman. Does that make sense?
It does.
Think about it though. No, you see, I think it's a good question because all of our thinking, and not just in this life, maybe this is the way we have thought, God knows for how long, is kind of based on the idea of every one of us having an independent existence of our own. And only when such questions are raised, we might step back a little and might seem to make sense. But don't worry, as soon as you go out, again, it's going to happen, doesn't matter. But now and then, try to give a thought to this. The example that sometimes you see in a pond which has stagnant water, there'll be this algae on top, kind of thing gathers. Now underneath, the water is very clear. Just above you have all this. And so sometimes you just kind of push that algae a little aside, and then you see very clear water. And then you just step back. After a while, it all comes and closes it up again. That's more or less what happens to all of us, and it will happen to everyone. So when we read text like this, and then some questions are raised in our mind, the way we have been thinking in our life all this while kind of gets shaken up a little bit, and kind of it just moves away a little bit, and you begin to say, oh, this is something I never thought of before. But then because it's not possible, neither we don't have time for it, now we don't have the strength to hold on to that. After a while, it all closes up again. And then a week later we come, and then we again think, and it opens up a little bit and think. Now, if you don't have to be doing it all the time, it won't even be possible. But now and then, when you think about this or read this text, give some thought to it. You don't have to believe it. This is not a dogma. It's not Krishna is not asking you to believe it. Just ask yourself these questions. See what you feel. Try to hold on to logic. Try to hold on to reason. And challenge your way of thinking up to this point. That's where courage is needed. Sure, there is courage to you go and help someone in a building on fire. You help someone who is in mortal danger. That's courage, no doubt about it. But this courage is not often recognized. That there is a certain way of thinking that we have acquired over the years, and now can we relearn or try to look at ourselves, look at the world, try to understand the world with a different set of eyes, with a different mind, with a different intellect. That can be challenging. Learning something new is easy. Unlearning our older ideas, that's tough. Sometimes, even if the new way of thinking might appear kind of more correct, even our old way of thinking might seem to be illogical, but there is still that clinging, like, this is how my life has been. I don't want to now rock the boat and start thinking about it in a different way. And so there is always this kind of inner tension going on. But that's about the whole thing. I mean, how did, not to go, we have already passed the time, but just the last thought. How did all new discoveries take place? By accident, but also they went out of their way to find something, many of them. You see, I mean, if everyone had remained like, oh, this is the town that I know, and I don't want to go someplace else because God knows who is there, so I'm just going to remain in this bubble all my life. Or it could be in terms of explorers who went to different paths and trying to explore this planet. It could be the explorers of the sky, or it could be those who tried to work in a laboratory. But every time they tried to push the boundary, they tried to think in a way no one had thought before. They tried to do things no one had done before. Only then great discoveries were done. And if you are just too careful, too cautious, you may not fall into any danger, but you're going to in that bubble all your life. There's no way that you're going to make some breakthrough. And that is why in spiritual life, you have to be brave. You have to be an explorer. In fact, the word is you have to explore your inner world. And sometimes it could be frightening. Sometimes it could be like, oh, I don't know. I have no idea what to expect. And just go, take a step at a time. If it gets too overwhelming, wait, rest for a while, but keep on going. And only one who keeps on going without stopping, such a person reaches the goal. The example that Ramakrishna used to give, and this is the last thing I'm going to say before we close, about the woodcutter. There was a woodcutter who used to go, he'd become old, and he used to go into the forest and cut wood and bring. And then one day, a great man met him, a teacher met him, and the teacher said, "What happened?" And he said, "Oh, now I'm getting old, and all this wood I've been cutting all my life, and I don't know how long I have to do. And the teacher said, why don't you just go ahead? Go ahead and see what happens. You have gone up to this portion of the jungle and done it, but you have never tried to explore what's beyond. Go further. And then this woodcutter took that advice to heart. And he then, for the first time in his life, he went beyond the boundary over which he had never gone before. And he goes ahead, and then he finds a forest of sandalwood trees, which are so much more precious than just ordinary trees. And he said, my God, I never thought, I never even came here. And then he cut those sandalwood and made so much more money. And then after some time, this thought came to me. But the teacher never told me, you stop at the sandalwood tree. He said, go further. Why have I stopped here? And then he goes further. And then he finds a silver mine, becomes even richer. And again stays there and said, okay, now I can build a big mansion. But then the thought comes, but the teacher never told me to stop at the silver. Let me push further. And then he finds gold and diamond and so on. That's our story. In spiritual life, most people are just happy, do a few things, it makes me happy, good, and live all their life, a pretty humdrum, ordinary kind of life. But then some people say no, and then you read a teacher like Krishna, or these Vedanta teachers who say, pray, meditate, think of the divine, think logically, don't be afraid to ask questions, go and help the people in need, practice karma yoga. And then we do that. And we do that a little bit. We do that a little bit, and then you find, now I'm able to sleep better. I'm able to experience some amount of calmness, which is great. And then a lot of people just stop there. Oh, I meditate daily, and I just feel wonderful. And I'm getting good sleep. And there is less stress. And then some people just stop there all their life. And then it's time to pause and say, well, they didn't say that just stop when you just feel a little good. I need to keep on doing it, and you do more. And then you find even deeper. So that's how deeper and deeper and deeper spiritual experiences will come. You are free to stop at any time you want, but then you won't get the silver and the gold and the diamonds. So how far you want to go, and this journey is not outside, this journey is inside. How far deep you want to go is up to you. But the deeper you go, the more deeper you dive within you. And there is a Bengali song which says that in the heart of the ocean, how many jewels, how many precious stones are hidden. Unless you dive deep, you are not going to get it. And so everything that we seek in life is already there in our heart. How much effort I should put to go in there, how deep I should go, how much time I should take, how often I should relax, how often I should take vacation. We have complete freedom about all of this. But depending on the choices we make, we will realize the fruits. We'll stop now. Om Jananim Saradam Devim Ramakrishnam Jagadgurum Padapadme Tayo Shritva Pranamami Muhur Muhu. We bow down to Sri Ramakrishna and Holy Mother. On Sunday, we shall have a guest speaker, Professor Francis Clooney of the Harvard Divinity School. He'll speak this Sunday on The Word Became Flesh. It's a part of our preparation for the Christmas celebration. So that will be on Sunday. On Wednesday next, from 6:30 to 8, we'll have the Christmas Eve celebration. And so you're welcome, as we do every year. We'll have worship, carols, readings, refreshments. So that's on 24th, next Wednesday. So next week we will not have Arati and meditation. So because everyone busy with their Christmas festivities, so no Arati meditation next week, and no Gita class next week because we have Christmas Eve celebration here. A week after that is 31st. So that's the first night. So many of you will be participating in the procession and you see fireworks, preparing to welcome the new year. And so on 31st also we won't have. So we are going to meet now after 3 weeks. We will meet for the Gita class. We will meet on 7th of January. So this is our last class for this year. We're going to meet next year now for the Gita class. But the meditation on Saturday, we'll have meditation as usual. But on Sunday onwards, Sunday will be the Christmas service, Christmas Eve celebration next Wednesday. Next week, no meditation on Tuesday and Saturday. That's the plan. And then, of course, on 1st of January, which I will announce later, but I can do it announced now itself. 1st of January, as we do, we'll have the Kalpataru celebration. There'll be potluck lunch, there's a short worship, reflection, music. That will be on 1st of January. 1st of January will be Thursday, I think. Yeah. Thursday, okay. Okay, so that's the program. So we'll conclude with a prayer now on page 3 of your books. Om. May the Divine Being, who is the Father in heaven of the Christians, Holy One of the Jewish faith, Allah of the Muslims, Buddha of the Buddhists, Tao of the Taoists, Ahura Mazda of the Zoroastrians, the Great Spirit of the Native Americans, and Brahman of the Hindus, lead us from the unreal to the real, from darkness to light, from death to immortality. May we be granted strength, freedom, and clear understanding. May we learn to see God in our own hearts and in everyone around us. May God bless us all and fill our hearts with gratitude, grace, and love. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be unto all.